Late last week, the Oregon State Supreme Court ruled that 10 sitting Republican state senators are barred from running for re-election in this next election because they violated a state law passed by the voters in the state that says if you have more than 10 unexcused absences, you are barred legally from running in the next election after your current term ends. 10 Republican lawmakers last year staged a 6-week-long walkout, the longest in the history of the state of Oregon. But they staged a 6-week walkout in order to not have to vote on legislation or to stall legislation regarding abortion rights, regarding transgender health care. So you've got all these women rights issues, you've got LGBTQ issues, and these Republican lawmakers said, we know it's going to pass, and we don't want it to pass because we don't want these people to have rights, right? Screw them. So we're just going to not show up to work so you don't have a quorum, so you cannot pass this legislation. So they sat out for 6 weeks in 2023, 10 people for 6 weeks. But in 2022, voters in the state overwhelmingly passed the measure that says if you have more than 10 unexcused absences in any session, you cannot run for office again in the next election following the session where you had the more than 10 unexcused absences. So the issue was taken up by the Oregon State Supreme Court after the Secretary of State said, nope, 10 Republicans, you can't run. And the Oregon State Supreme Court said, yeah, that's the letter of the law. That's what the people passed. You cannot run for office again. But it's only in the next election. So they're not going to be elected officials for a few years. After that, they are allowed legally under this legislation. They can come back and run again. But I like this. I like this legislation. I like this decision by the Supreme Court for not bastardizing what the voters passed. If this is what the voters wanted, then it should be implemented as is. And these lawmakers honestly shouldn't have even tried to fight it. And what's even dumber to me is that these lawmakers knew that this legislation had already passed before they did their walkout. So there's no saying like, oh, well, we didn't know it was a thing. Yeah, you did. So when they went to the Supreme Court, by the way, they tried to argue that, well, the language of the law is actually a little vague. And because, the term actually ends in like January, but the election's in November. So technically, like we could do that. The Oregon Supreme Court's like, no, this is dumb. Please stop making these idiotic arguments. So there's now 10 Republican state senators in the state of Oregon who will not be running for re-election this year, next year, whenever those elections are, and there isn't a damn thing they can do about it.